Nuclear-powered missile submarines became a key part of Western and Soviet deterrence.
Part of the new generation of Soviet submarines back in the 1980s. It was a nuclear-powered attack submarine.
At the bottom of the Norwegian Sea lies a machine that was never designed to fail. When scientists sent a robot down to inspect a long-lost Soviet submarine,
Russia decides to lift the Kursk. It is the heaviest object ever to be raised from the seafloor. Inch by inch, the Kursk is raised to the surface.
they expected corrosion and collapse. Instead, they recorded a radioactive discharge, nearly 1 million times hotter than the surrounding water. As the data streamed back and sensors surged, one conclusion became unavoidable. Komsomolets wasn't a dead wreck. It was becoming active again.
And because it was drawn out with some people alive in the stern, incapable the Russian government, the Russian Navy was, with handling a disaster of that type.
The titanium ghost, the Komsomolets and its nuclear arsenal. Deep beneath the Barents Sea lies the K-2-78 Komsomolets, one of the most advanced submarines ever built. On April 7, 1989, a catastrophic fire broke out aboard the vessel during a dive. 42 crew members died as the submarine sank to the ocean floor, carrying its nuclear reactor and 2 plutonium-tipped torpedoes to a depth of 1,700 meters. It was designed to dive deeper than any other combat submarine in history. For decades, people believed the hull could resist rust and corrosion, but the ocean has proven otherwise. Titanium slows corrosion but cannot prevent it forever, and cracks have started forming after decades underwater. The Komsomolets was armed with a 190-megawatt nuclear reactor and carried 2 plutonium-tipped torpedoes, each containing about 28 pounds of plutonium. Unlike uranium, plutonium is highly toxic, long-lasting, and more dangerous in water. If it escapes, it can contaminate currents, marine life, and eventually humans. The combination of a reactor and plutonium torpedoes made the Komsomolets not only a technological marvel but a potential environmental disaster. On April 7, 1989, the submarine suffered a catastrophic fire. Smoke and flames raced through the vessel, systems failed, and the crew had limited time to respond. Ultimately, the Komsomolets sank to the ocean floor, leaving its nuclear reactor and torpedoes as ticking hazards beneath the waves. Robots and monitoring missions today confirm that radioactive materials are slowly leaking from the wreck. The Komsomolets is not just a historical artifact. It is an active source of contamination, demonstrating how Cold War technology continues to threaten ecosystems decades after sinking. Its deep location has slowed dispersal, but ocean currents can carry radioactive particles toward shallower waters, where fish and crabs accumulate contaminants. Scientists warn that corrosion will worsen over time, potentially releasing larger amounts of radioactive materials. The story of the Komsomolets reminds us of how dangerous these submarines were in life and remain in death. This submarine is a deep-sea reminder that some Cold War relics were never meant to be forgotten. Camera sees it first: the plume and the red mercury theory. The underwater robot glides toward the wreck of the Komsomolets. Its camera locks on a rusty ventilation pipe sticking out of the seabed. Then something strange appears. A cloud of pale material rising from the pipe, drifting into the dark water around the sub. Scientists called it a plume. The source is clear: corroded torpedo casings and degraded reactor shielding. The plume proves the submarine's containment systems have failed after 3 decades underwater. Sensors on the robot spike. One sample taken right near the pipe showed levels of radioactive cesium that were close to 1 million times higher than normal seawater. That's a figure researchers say is exceptionally high. This doesn't mean the whole ocean is dying. The wreck sits nearly a mile deep, and most ocean life doesn't live right at the site. But the plume shows the submarine is still leaking radioactive material decades after it sank. Scientists have been monitoring this wreck since the 1990s, and they've seen leaks before, but this new footage makes the problem look much worse. The reason this debate matters is simple. If a plume that huge is real, it points to ongoing radioactive contamination from the sub's reactor and weapons. That has real-world consequences for fishing, local economies, and the trust people place in seafood from the region. It also reminds us that old Cold War technology can still affect the world today. The ticking time bomb, how the leak could spread across the Arctic. The Komsomolets sits nearly a mile below the Barents Sea, but the danger isn't stuck at the bottom. Saltwater slowly eats away at the titanium and steel of the torpedo casings, letting radioactive material escape. The cesium-137 and plutonium inside don't just stay in the deep. Cold Arctic currents can carry tiny particles upward, where fish, crabs, and plankton swim. That's how the contamination enters the food chain. A crab might pick up radioactive dust from the seabed. A fish eats many crabs, and a human or predator eats the fish. Over time, the radiation can build up in larger animals. Norwegian researchers have detected elevated cesium in sediment samples near the wreck site. While fish tested in commercial fishing zones remain within international safety limits, scientists warn these levels could rise as corrosion accelerates. The contamination spreads slowly, but scientists say it's a matter of how fast, not if. Currents mix the water, carrying radioactive particles far from the original wreck. Even though the Komsomolets is deep, plumes of contamination can reach shallower waters where most fishing happens. That means the risk isn't just to the seabed, it's to ecosystems and humans. The torpedo casings degrade faster than the reactor itself. Each crack or hole gives cesium and plutonium a path into the water. Once in the currents, the radioactive material can travel hundreds of miles, slowly affecting more marine life. Scientists monitor these areas closely, using underwater robots and sensors. They record radiation levels and track where plumes go. Their warnings are clear: the problem isn't contained. With each passing year, the wreck leaks a little more, and the food chain carries it further. The Komsomolets is a reminder that Cold War technology doesn't stay buried forever. If one submarine can slowly spread contamination across Arctic waters, the stakes rise when other sunken submarines with nuclear material are added to the picture. And if one submarine can poison a coastline, what about three? Arctic triple threat: Komsomolets, K-27, and K-159. The Arctic Ocean hides more than just one sunken submarine. Beneath the waves lie three nuclear wrecks that together represent major concentrated radioactive hazards in Arctic waters. First is K-27, a Cold War sub with a liquid metal reactor. The liquid metal coolant used in its reactors solidifies at lower temperatures, making any future recovery operation technically complex. It was sunk intentionally in the 1980s with all its fuel loaded, a desperate move to reduce risk on land. But it left a ticking source of radiation at the bottom of the Kara Sea. Then there's K-159, a Project 627 submarine. In 2003, it was being towed for decommissioning during a storm. The sub sank with nearly a ton of spent nuclear fuel inside. Some experts call it an intentional accident, suggesting corners were cut to save time or money, leaving one more nuclear hazard on the sea floor. And of course, there's the Komsomolets, which we've already seen leaking cesium and plutonium. Combined with K-27 and K-159, these three wrecks create a potential Arctic Chernobyl, a radioactive zone with decades of slow, deep-water contamination. Currents can carry particles far. Fish absorb radiation, and local ecosystems are at risk. Each wreck tells a different story, but all point to the same lesson. The Arctic Ocean became a graveyard for Cold War mistakes. The technology was powerful, but oversight and safety often fell short. These subs weren't just sunk, they were left with dangerous fuel and weapons. And that risk continues decades later. Monitoring continues. Robots dive down to measure radiation, and scientists track the slow corrosion of hulls and torpedoes. But the sheer amount of radioactive material means even small leaks can add up over time. The Arctic isn't the only ocean with nuclear wrecks. On the other side of Russia, the Pacific problem is far bigger. There, the wrecks aren't three. There are hundreds, and each one carries its own danger, waiting silently beneath the waves. The Pacific Nightmare: hundreds of rusting submarines. After the Cold War ended, Russia faced a new problem: hundreds of old submarines left to rot. When the USSR collapsed, there wasn't enough money to safely dismantle them. Many of these subs still contained nuclear reactors or spent fuel, turning quiet bays into potential environmental hazards. Along the Pacific coast, near Vladivostok and other naval yards, submarines were towed into shallow waters and abandoned. Sites like Pavlovsk Bay became holding areas where decommissioned vessels awaited dismantlement that never came. Over time, the hulls began rusting, and corrosion caused leaks of radioactive material. Satellite images show rows of these vessels, some half-submerged, sitting silently in the water. Experts warn that these old subs are slowly contaminating the surrounding bays. Cesium, strontium, and other radioactive isotopes can escape into the water and sediment, eventually reaching fish, shellfish, and even the shoreline. Environmental monitoring teams have documented elevated radiation readings near abandoned submarine hulls in Pacific bays. Unlike deep Arctic wrecks, many of these Pacific submarines sit in shallow water, making it easier for radiation to move into areas where humans and wildlife interact. Currents carry radioactive particles to nearby waters, and over decades, these leaks can create long-term hot zones in otherwise populated areas. This is not just a theoretical threat. Environmental teams monitoring these bays have recorded increased radiation near the hulls of old subs. The problem grows slowly, but it is real, measurable, and persistent. Rusting metal, leftover fuel, and decades of neglect combine to create hazards that may last centuries. The scale is shocking. Dozens, maybe over 100 submarines, each a small nuclear reactor sitting in vulnerable bays. These graveyards of technology are a legacy of the Cold War, left for future generations to monitor and manage. And yet, the Pacific threat isn't hidden. In one city, this isn't a rumor. It's literally at the doorstep of 600,000 people, a reminder that nuclear history still lives in the present. Vladivostok, Russia's Pacific nuclear graveyard. Vladivostok is one of Russia's busiest port cities, but just offshore lies a submarine cemetery, a graveyard of rusting Cold War vessels. Some of these submarines are half sunken in mud, lying only a few hundred feet from neighborhoods where people live and work. Many still contain reactors or leftover nuclear fuel, slowly corroding in the shallow bays. The scale is shocking. Dozens of subs rest here side by side. Their hulks are riddled with holes, exposing spent fuel and sensitive components to the elements. Over decades, salt water has eaten away at steel, creating a slow but steady leak of radioactive material into the water and sediment. History adds weight to these fears. In August 1985, submarine K431 suffered a reactor accident during refueling at Chashma Bay. The explosion killed 10 personnel and contaminated the surrounding waters, demonstrating that these vessels remain dangerous even while docked. It remains a stark reminder of how dangerous these vessels could be, even in port. For decades, intelligence agencies kept a close eye on Vladivostok's submarine graveyards. The CIA and other organizations monitored the area for signs of sabotage, illegal scavenging, or unexpected leaks. While most of what happened remains classified, declassified reports hint that the Cold War's nuclear secrets didn't always stay buried. Residents live near these rusting giants, often unaware of the risks beneath the water. Scientists continue to measure radiation and monitor corrosion, but the threat of contamination persists. Shallow water, populated areas, and old nuclear fuel make this one of the most sensitive sites in the Pacific. But the most shocking Soviet submarine story isn't about leaks. It's about what the CIA secretly recovered from one of these wrecks, an operation that has only recently been revealed through declassified documents. Howard Hughes's Deep Sea Lie. In the mid-1970s, the ocean looked like a new frontier for industry. Billionaire Howard Hughes announced plans to mine the deep sea for manganese nodules, a bold, futuristic venture that captured headlines. But the story didn't add up. The real project was far less glamorous. Hughes' Glomar Explorer wasn't designed to collect minerals. It was a CIA cover for a daring Cold War operation. Beneath the guise of ocean mining, the ship carried secret equipment meant to lift sunken Soviet submarines from the ocean floor. The vessel was massive, built with a huge moon pool in the center and powerful cranes that could hoist submarines weighing thousands of tons. Its construction alone cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and every part was carefully disguised to hide its true purpose. Ocean mining was the perfect Cold War misdirection. Journalists, scientists, and foreign governments all assumed the mission was about extracting minerals. Meanwhile, the Glomar Explorer's secret cameras and robotic arms were ready to capture images of nuclear submarines, reactors, and weapons resting on the seabed. The operation pushed the limits of technology. The ship had to remain stable over wrecks thousands of feet below the surface while deploying cameras and grappling with massive objects. Engineers designed tools to grab delicate nuclear components without causing a disaster, a task so difficult that even modern ships would struggle. This wasn't just espionage, it was an oceanic spy craft, combining cutting-edge engineering, intelligence work, and high-stakes risk. Every move had to remain secret because if the Soviets discovered the plan, it could have triggered a major international incident. At the time, the story seemed almost impossible, a billionaire mining the deep sea while secretly spying on enemy submarines. Few could imagine that the vessel's true mission would capture unbelievable footage from the ocean floor, revealing the hidden Cold War battles beneath the waves. But the Glomar lie was only the setup. The following year, the real mission, the one that would shock the world with images from the ocean floor, finally began. The technology developed for Azorian, deep-sea robotics, heavy lift systems, precise underwater operations, now represents the kind of engineering capability needed to contain today's leaking wrecks. But instead of recovering intelligence, the challenge is preventing environmental disaster. Project Azorian, the 1975 Glomar Explorer operation. In 1975, the CIA attempted the impossible: recover a Soviet submarine from 16,000 feet below the Pacific Ocean. The sub was the K-129, lost years earlier with its nuclear missiles and sensitive technology. Ordinary ships couldn't even reach that depth. But the CIA built the Glomar Explorer, a massive ship with a secret claw named Clementine, designed to grab the wreck from the ocean floor. The operation was delicate. Cameras captured images of the sunken sub and, tragically, the remains of Soviet sailors still inside. Every move had to be precise. A mistake could destroy the sub, release nuclear material, or create a political crisis. Yet the CIA managed to recover torpedoes, technical manuals, and other secret equipment, though some of the wreck was lost in the lift. The partial recovery succeeded despite enormous technical challenges. The operation established new standards for deep-sea intelligence gathering and demonstrated capabilities that would prove relevant decades later. When journalists finally asked about the mission, the CIA famously replied with the first public use of the "neither confirm nor deny" statement, later called the Glomar response. It became a cornerstone of modern intelligence secrecy. The story of Project Azorian shows just how far the US was willing to go to capture Soviet secrets. Cameras, robotic claws, and a billion-dollar ship were all deployed in the pursuit of intelligence hidden in the deep ocean. The mission was part technology, part espionage, and all high stakes. And the lesson connects to today. If the CIA went to such extraordinary lengths to lift a sunken submarine and seize its secrets, imagine the challenge the world faces in containing the radioactive leaks from decades-old Soviet wrecks in the Arctic and Pacific. These wrecks are still underwater, still leaking, and still dangerous. The oceans hold secrets, from nuclear plumes to sunken submarines, and some of them may never be fully recovered or controlled. Can these time bombs be stopped? The Arctic and Pacific Oceans are full of sunken Soviet submarines, each carrying nuclear fuel, plutonium, and radioactive torpedoes. Decades underwater have weakened hulls and allowed leaks. Can these time bombs be stopped before the contamination spreads further? Scientists and engineers have proposed several ideas. Russia launched a new mission to the Komsomolets site in 2019. Remotely operated vehicles captured updated footage showing accelerated hull deterioration compared to previous surveys. New cracks had formed in the torpedo compartment sections, and radiation readings indicated leakage rates were increasing rather than stabilizing. The findings prompted Norwegian authorities to expand monitoring programs across the Barents Sea. One plan is a sealed sarcophagus, essentially covering the wreck with a protective barrier to prevent more radiation from escaping. Another is lifting submarines like K-159, but that carries extreme risk. The hulls are brittle and could break apart, releasing radioactive material during the operation. Some experts are exploring gel injection methods, pumping special sealing compounds into the wreck to immobilize fuel and contaminants. These solutions could slow leaks for decades, but the costs are enormous, billions of dollars for each submarine. And the challenge isn't just money. Plutonium, for example, has a half-life of over 24,000 years, meaning even small amounts left in the water remain dangerous for countless generations. Governments continue to monitor radiation levels and deploy underwater robots to track leaks. But even with careful observation, the reality is uncertain. Ocean currents can carry radioactive particles far from the wrecks, affecting fish, marine life, and coastal communities. The engineering challenges are immense, and time is limited. Every year that passes increases the risk of corrosion and contamination. Some experts argue that inaction may cost more in the long run than any cleanup operation. The Soviets buried secrets in the deep. Now the ocean is slowly unburying them. These wrecks are ticking environmental and technological time bombs, and the world is still figuring out how to respond. We don't yet have perfect solutions, and no one knows exactly what might happen next. The 2019 findings eliminated any remaining hope that time alone would solve the problem. These wrecks are not slowly becoming safer, they are actively deteriorating. The question is no longer whether action is needed, but whether it will come before contamination reaches irreversible levels.